see a single person I don't know, so I think you know who I am. Thank you for coming. Thank our candidates for being here. We've been saying a lot lately. Somebody challenged me. I said, this election is really important to me. And they said, why to you? I said, well, to all of us. And there's 2,000 students out there counting on us making the best decision we can. We appreciate anybody from the community that wants to support our district. So we want this to be a friendly evening as possible. And we have rules, and we have the questions already written out. And there'll be an opportunity at the end if we go quickly to ask some additional questions. Just a couple quick introductions. Julie Honsberger is our timekeeper, so she'll hold up a sign to show them. Okay, that's to help us keep on time. And our moderator is Christy Robbie, who is a former board member and parent and friend of the district. So we're very happy that she's here. Leslie Savelli from Can Do is here, and the co-presidents from Misha are here. Where'd you go? Okay, Jennifer and Nathan are here, and they're from the school. And if you need anything from this campus, they'll be willing to help you. Will, at the end, if there's time, will be willing to. There's some cards over there. If you have a question, write it down, bring it back over here, and we'll give it to Julie, and we'll get it up to the front. Okay? So thank you for coming.
Great. So is my voice loud enough that that's usually what everybody says about my voice.
That's why I practiced.
Yeah, thank you. I don't know how to
Is there
turn
a
that
question
off.
in there somewhere?
Yeah. I'm getting rid of this thing, sorry. All right, so welcome everybody. I'm thrilled that you're all here and interested in hearing from our candidates. I think as Tom said, this is really about the kids in our district and making sure that we have a school board that understands our issues within the school and tries to do the very best to educate our children. So we have a somewhat formal format for this debate, and in large part that is just so that we give equal airtime to everybody and make it fair. So what we're going to do is we will give each candidate 2 minutes to give an opening statement, and we're going to just start with Bruce and work on down the line. Julie has got her time cards, and she's going to help keep everybody in line, and if you don't quit when she says stop, I will be over here to get you guys. After we do that, we are then going to move to some questions that I have. Again, each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer those, and then if after people speak, if somebody wants to make a rebuttal or to add something, they can do that. They will be allowed 1 minute. And then once we finish all that, we're going to open it up to all of you, and I hope you will have some questions for our candidates. So that's the way the night's going to run. All right, so why don't we start with Bruce, and your 2 minutes start now.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Bruce Abbott. How's this working, by the way? Everyone?
Great.
Okay, good. I've got a true passion for education, and I've contributed a lot to the Dixie School District and feel I can contribute a lot more. I followed my son through school. I started as a volunteer at Balaceto, and then at Miller Creek, where I served as treasurer and both the PTA and the home and school club of those schools. I was elected and served as president of 1TL at Terra Linda High School. That's the high school foundation there, and I received Volunteer of the Year award at Terra Linda. I was elected and I've served on the Dixie School Board for 8 years. I was elected to president 3 times, and I'm currently vice president. I helped establish our strategic planning process as well as our budget committee. And both of these things I think are about engagement and communication, which I think are key aspects of a school board. I'm involved in countywide efforts as well, which I believe helped Dixie School District. I'm Vice President of Marin County School Board Association. I'm also co-chair of the Joint Legislative Action Committee, called JLAC, and this is a committee of superintendent trustees that focus on issues, legislative issues that affect Marin. And I'm currently working with Sacramento on reauthorization of what's called school of choice legislation that provides $100,000 to the Dixie School District. That's due to expire in a few years. I've also reached out to the high school students in Marin to include them in our JLAC trip to Sacramento to allow a student voice in our discussions. I was also past chair of the Marin County Efficiency and Effectiveness Task Force, which looked for a way to improve all of our districts. Beyond Marin, I was recently nominated to the Buck Educational Institute to provide professional training for our teachers in project-based learning. This is a time of very exciting change. There's more in-depth curriculum with the Common Core. There's more local control in our funding formula. And we're expecting much more participation as we define our priorities. So, just my time's running up. So it's a very exciting time. I would like to continue working on the Dixie School Board, and so I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Hi, first I'd like to, can you hear me? Is that, yeah. First I'd like to thank you for hosting this and giving us the opportunity to speak tonight. Having worked as an elementary school teacher for 13 years and as a licensed marriage and family therapist for over 20 years, I have focused on the importance of healthy environments for children and families. I'm running because I believe our educational system is central to our community's health. Like many of us, I bought a home here, attracted by the excellent Dixie School District. Now that we're seeing some changes in our district, with seniors moving out and younger families moving in with more children, I want to focus on sustainable, long-term planning. It is vital that the board sets the direction for this to maintain and, if necessary, expand our district. At the beginning of the summer, I went to a community meeting about a very difficult and controversial topic, and I was struck by the collective inability of the adults in the room to come to any meaningful resolution. As a retired teacher, I immediately thought of our children and our communication and the kind of environment that supports results-oriented, meaningful conversations. Given the challenges and changes that we are facing in our school district, I know that I can make a contribution. I've been a director of my local homeowners association for over 15 years, and I was chosen as president 6 years ago. I've always sought to achieve fair and financially prudent management decisions over the issues we face. I will bring that same sense of balance to the Dixie Board. Since I'm semi-retired, I have the time to work closely with our families, children, teachers, administration, as well as the wider community to achieve the highest level of educational excellence that our children deserve and that we all want. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Brad Honsberger, and I'm running for Dixie School Board. I started 10 years ago here in the school district with my daughter in kindergarten, and I've been a volunteer in the schoolrooms ever since then. I've also been, we purchased a house here 23 years ago in Terra Linda, so I've been not only involved in the Dixie School District, but I've also been invested in the community. While I was doing my volunteer work here, I also became a member of the site council to really get an idea of how the schools work. And I was on site council for 4 years. In my last year of site council, I was nominated for the school board by a former principal here by the name of Gina Casella. That allowed me to not only get an idea of what was going on at the school level, but also the wider perspective of what was going on in the district. And with my daughter moving from one school to the other, the transition from elementary to middle school was paramount in what I wanted to understand and work towards. So my 4 years that I've been here on the school board, we're kind of just getting things started. In that 4 years, our API scores have risen to over 900 at all the schools, which is the top 5% of the state. We've defined our district goals, we've established a budget committee that Bruce alluded to, and we've continued our home to school transportation that we have. I feel we're just getting started, and I think there's a lot of work to do with the upcoming issues, the budget, Common Core, and the increase in our district as far as attendance of students. So I heard earlier, or I read earlier, that just because there's an election doesn't mean that something's broken. So I hope you all can take that to heart. Thanks.
And my name is Mark Schott. In the spirit of trying to get more questions out of the audience, I'll try to keep this relatively short. I have 3 kids. 2 of them are in the district. One's on his way. Been married 18 years. Born in San Francisco. Spent over 35 years here in Northern California. I've lived abroad. Served in the military, on the board for 8 years. My 2nd term. I'm finishing up. If elected, it'll be my 3rd term. Every year we tend to hear things around, this is different, we've never seen this before, we don't have enough money. Welcome to California. Okay, that's kind of the nature of what makes us resilient and what makes us, great, right? There always seems to be opportunity around the corner. I think tonight you'll hear a lot of different questions and you'll hear a lot of the same answers. We've been fortunate for the last 8 years to really have about 95% of our votes, and I'm probably I'm overthinking this. It's almost every one of our votes is 5-0. We tend to not have a contentious board. That doesn't mean that we don't have differing opinions, we do. And when voiced, if you happen to be at one of our board meetings, it gets interesting because not everybody lines up on the same side on every issue. And there are times when each one of us surprises the other. I think the good thing on our school board is that we've all been able to come to some understanding that's kept it civil. As far as the problems that are here today, there are a lot of the same problems we've had before. We have a number of kids in our district that are low income or challenged because of where they're growing up socially, right? And we have to deal with all the kids that are in the district and provide a quality education at all levels. That includes challenging the highest performers and also bringing up the kids that are challenged the most. So I ask you to bring me back to the board. It's an area that I'm extremely concerned about, and supporting our teachers and our children and our community is important to me. Thanks.
My name is Culbertson Simmons, and my youngest started kindergarten this year here at Mary Silvera. So like many of you guys out there, I have a long-term personal interest in keeping the Dixie Schools great. My professional work as a teacher and an attorney proves my commitment to kids and education. It also is particularly relevant to this board right now in 2013 and moving forward. I was certified to teach English as a second language and as a foreign language at Berkeley. And I learned there how to teach without basic resources, which served me well when I taught overseas in Tanzania and Latvia in my early 20s, and also when I taught ESL locally, because we know that we don't have enough resources. To this day, I value teachers as our #1 resource, and I know firsthand what their challenges are, and I appreciate their work. I then worked in my mid-20s. I began working as an education analyst for San Francisco General in their ER department, and during this time I began attending law school at Hastings. When I finished and passed the bar, I became a prosecutor, and I've been prosecuting mostly special interest crimes for the last 15 years in San Francisco, focused the last several years on child abuse. The skills I developed would be relevant and valuable to the district at this time, as the district faces legal changes through new laws and state mandates impacting first funding with the new funding formula that was enacted in July. Second, the curriculum as we move forward in adapting to the federal standard on the core curriculum. And third, as we weigh expansion options in light of our unprecedented student growth over the last 2 years. Moving forward, there's an opportunity for more local control of resources, but it comes with accountability. The board needs to understand legal implications in proactively planning and making the right choice. I know how to focus and collaborate on a board, having served as an officer of the Municipal Attorneys Association for the past 4 years, and I hope you'll give me an opportunity to bring my skill set to work for our community.
Thank you. All right, so let me start with this question to remind you, you each get 2 minutes, and then afterwards, after everyone's responded, I'll ask if anybody wants to have a 1-minute rebuttal or wants to add something. So to, mix things up, why don't we start with Ruth? And could you tell me, how does your professional background qualify and prepare you for your role as a board trustee?
Well, as a retired teacher, I have experience with education. I taught for 13 years in West Harlem as both a second grade teacher for about 6 years. Then I became a math resource specialist, and finally I wound up being a guidance counselor. So I have that background in education, which I think is important. Secondly, having served on my homeowners association board, managing ever since I've been on the board, we have not had to do a special assessment for unexpected as well as expected improvements that we did on our properties. That takes budgeting, that takes planning, that takes being able to be financially prudent. That also requires the ability to have people who have differing views come to you, come before you, and be able to hear them. My experience as a marriage and family therapist has given me that opportunity and that ability to be able to let people know that they're being heard. I think a lot of conflict can be avoided if people really know that they're being heard. And that's one of the things if you've ever been in couples counseling, you know that it can become vitriolic. And so my experience in that area will help me making decisions on the board as well, and being able to let people know that they can be heard.
Great, thank you, Ruth. Brad?
My experience, I went to elementary school and I went to middle school. Yeah, those two things. I know what it's like to be a kid.
Kind of teach.
That was it. I'm in sales, and so all day, every day, I'm meeting people and talking to people. And I think that's really what I've kind of leveraged, I guess, if you will, with my time on the board. But even before that, as I mentioned before, I spent a lot of time in the classroom, a lot of time volunteering, field trips, driving on field trips, going with the kids year in and year out. Been in the district for 10 years. I'm going to be in for 6 more, so I'm a lifer, if you will. And the experience that I've had with the board, I did a 2-year Master's in Governance program that learned how to be a board member and gave us a lot of ideas about finance and budgeting and governance and a lot of different areas that you really have to know to be a board member. And then the 4 years on the board has allowed me to interact with a lot of other boards. My relationships are with the parents, my relationships are with the teachers, my relationships are with the administration, not only in this district, but in other districts. And so it allows me to find out what's working in other places, maybe what's not working in other places, and a lot of sharing of ideas. But it's even further than that. I think we're a larger part of the community as well. And so I have very good relationships with a lot of the civic leaders in our area, and allows us to talk about issues that affect not only our school and our school district, but also the city and the surrounding community that we're in. Thank you.
Mark?
Ready? I might need all 2 minutes here. I started with a paper route when I was 9.
There you go.
Delivering the Marcus Courier, it actually used to have it's very similar to the Marin IJ now, in weight. So, my first real work as an adult was in the military. Spent 3 years in Central America. Came out of that, worked up in Portland, Oregon, for a utility, young kid, doing something I didn't like, which I'm sure a lot of us have done before. Spent a large part of my career doing something I do like, which is talking to people. I spent a large part of my day building solutions around infrastructure, network solutions. And I've dealt with a small business owner Tuesday night I was having dinner with a guy who flew out of Australia for a $40 billion company. So I've moved all over the table, though. What I found that's common is most people have very basic interests that are simple. It's affordable, is it doable, and will it work? And that's, I think, what a lot of people are looking for in an education, right? Is it affordable? So does our tax base work, right? Are our teachers earning enough money to retain them and reward them properly so that they'll come back and be energized to continue to do that? And are our kids really, which is the common denominator in this formula, Are they succeeding, right? Are we showing success in the classroom? Yeah, I think that's what I bring. It's just common sense. Sometimes it doesn't work in public education, right? Private and public don't always marry one another very well. But in this case, we've been elected as trustees to make sure that formula between asking someone to pay taxes and paying a public servant have to work together. And I think that's what I bring. It's just common sense around that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And what I bring, not to repeat some of what I've said before, but I want to emphasize the fact as an attorney and with my legal background, I think this is a time when there is unprecedented changes, and I believe that we're facing changes across 3 major areas, with the funding formula being in effect as of July. It's going to be, it would be great to be on a board with experienced board members, but I also think that people are going to be facing entirely new laws that will need to be analyzed and the options properly weighed, because there is an accountability, there's state mandates around that. So I do this for a living. In the last year, I switched over to doing appellate work, and that's all I do is I interpret and I apply laws from all the way up to the Constitution. And that might not seem to have the obvious meaning for everybody, but I think at this time and this juncture in particular, it's going to be really important. We're a basic aid district. I don't know that we will stay in this category. I'm not sure what the meaning of that category will be in upcoming years, but I think it's important to have someone who has my professional skill set, because I know how to analyze the law and I know how to plan under that framework. The other thing is, and what I noted in my opening was I have the background of a teacher, so I really have a passionate connection with kids and education, and I believe that in order to make the Common Core work for our community, we're going to have a real partnership between parents and teachers, and really support our teachers and support our parents, and make the information about the core curriculum as one example accessible to the community. So one thing I'm prepared to do, which I demonstrated in going door to door since late September, is that I will take the extra steps to come to you with the information. I know it's nearly impossible to come to public meetings, but I think if you have if you have the information easily accessible to you, you will be more willing to commit to the process.
Thank you. And Bruce?
Can everyone hear me? I think we're going to pass on the mics. Okay, great. I spent 20 years in a large corporate environment, Bank of America. About 10 of that was in finance and accounting, which I find is very useful in terms of understanding how the finances work in the district and how we work, how we budget, and how we manage our priorities. And I also work on the other side on technology, which is becoming more and more a big part of education. But another thing I did at Bank of America is banking in the early 80s was a highly regulated industry, very similar to education. And what happened due to a number of law changes, it became a very unregulated industry. And I was part of a group at the bank that it really took the bank to a massive change of what it's like when you don't have a lot of regulation on top of you, how you make decisions, how you prioritize, how you do those things. It's a lot is what's going on in education right now. We're going to be giving a lot more local control than we have before, and we're going to have to figure out how we steer through that on our own without being told. So I think that's a big help. The other thing I did since leaving Bank of America, I ran a small business for about 10 years. In a lot of ways, a school district the size of Dixie is very much like a small district. I mean, like a small business, highly regulated, but it's very much like a small business. So I think that helps. And then a couple of years ago, I decided it was time for a career change. I've done that a few times in my life, obviously. And I took some retooling classes at USC in school finance, and I got trained as a school finance business manager. I worked down in South Slater about 6 months as an intern, and now I work full-time in the Lagunitas School District as a business manager. So of course I bring that knowledge and skill to the table at every meeting of understanding, in detail how a budget's built and how it works. And I think it help us guide us forward, because we're going to need to get away from the numbers and into a language about what our priorities are and how we run ourselves as a district. The numbers really should be a result of that conversation, not the drivers of those conversations. So I think all of that really adds to my experience that I think helps me be a good trustee. Thank you.
Great. Does anybody have something else that they wanted to add? Yeah, Ruth started.
Yes.
That was a test.
Thank God I passed it. So does anybody have anything else? No. All right, good. So Brad, why don't we start with you? So what do you see as the board's roles and responsibilities?
The board's roles and responsibilities are really setting policy and kind of guiding the policy of the district. We're not here as any individual person to make decisions of what's going to happen, who's going to be hired, what's going to happen to the district as an individual, but we're part of a consortium, and as Mark alluded to, a strong, most of our votes have been 5-0. Really show that we're kind of on the same path in representing what's going on with the needs of the community and how it pertains to the district. So a lot of people have that misconception that they can come up to us and complain to us about something that's going on at their school, and hey, can you make a decision and get that done? But that's not really what we're here for. We're here to help digest the budget numbers, try to understand what's going on with those numbers. I remember when I started, and I think Christy said, you're not going to really even make sense of those things for 2 years. So start making sense of those finally. And as Bruce said, that we have a lot of challenges now with the new way that we're going to be funded from the state, and how we need to digest and direct those dollars. And so the decisions that we make obviously trickle down, but they are part of what the community wants, and we really work on the transparency factor with the budget numbers, with everything that we do, because we're not paid. A lot of people might think that we're paid. We're not paid. We're doing this out of the love of kids, and the reason
You're not paid?
I'm not paid. And I spend the time to do that and understand what's going on, and try to make the decisions that are positive for the best education for the children in our district.
Thanks. Mark?
Roles and responsibilities. We take an oath of office. It's to uphold the U.S. Constitution and the Constitution of the state. I think when we do that, we realize we signed up for a little more than what we were bargaining for. It kind of changes your dynamic. It's not quite the Batman tilted room moment, but there is a bit of a pow moment. I do think that the things that come up as a board trustee are interesting only in the sense that you really have to work through your personal opinions and come to a consensus. Whether or not you agree with what's being said, there comes a point where it's not a white flag moment, it's really a collaboration moment. And it might have taken you 2 years to work through the numbers. I think it's taken me about 8 to work through that process. Not that I'm completely comfortable with it, but it is hard not to want to state your opinion first and instead listen to the other individuals in the room and kind of get a shape of where the conversation's going. I could pay a compliment to Bruce. Bruce is quite good at that. Okay, so he's good at taking what the tone is and where it's going and reshaping it. I could be better at it. I do think that I still deserve another look at another 4 years, but regardless, the things that are difficult are, we had busing come up recently in the last few years, and there was a tone around the board that we might have to get rid of busing. And there were a couple of board members that felt passionate about that, to the point that we had a parents committee and we had drives to try to get busing up. Busing went up in price, and the economies took us sideways. And we went from having 450 riders to below 300. And it became an issue. And as a board, what I can say is that we have busing today, but for the work of all the board members rallying around understanding how we do that. So it's every time, it could be housing, it could be affordable housing, it could be, we came on, we were declining enrollment, right?
So Mark, can you wrap up, please?
Yeah, now we're going up rapidly. It's just change, and collaboration is probably the most important part of our role and our responsibility. Thank you.
Lisa?
Yes, I believe that the board, if you look at the textbook, they'll say that the school board function is 3-part, and it would be that it has an administrative overview. It doesn't micromanage, but administrative overview. It has an executive function in terms of setting the policy that guides the schools and the curriculum, the funding, these issues I've mentioned before. And it also has a duty in its community partnership with everybody in the district. I think all of us probably share the same opinion and the same commitment to wanting to be on the board for the kids and for the schools. And it's a singular focus, and it's not political, and it's nonpartisan. And that attracted me greatly because it's all good. And it attracted me that there's no salary, and it's a labor of love. But I'd also want to comment on the fact that how important it is to have a collaborative board, and the fact that I've served 4 years on a board with lawyers. And I've survived it, and I've survived 15 years of working in contentious courtrooms in San Francisco with lawyers. And most of what we do, contrary to television and popular belief, is negotiate. And most of the times, if you've been there 15 years, you've invited public defenders to your wedding. So it's not what people think. And I'm well versed in getting over my personal opinion. I'm strident and I'm an advocate, and I'm not adverse to expressing what I believe in. I think it's a must for us to come to a correct consensus for us all to express our beliefs, but we must collaborate. A board is also, and most importantly, a governing body. And so individual trustees are empowered only as they stand together on a board, not as individuals. We have no power as individuals, and we can't flaunt it or act as though we do. It's an abuse. I'm not conflict averse, as I've stated, nor do I abhor dissent. I think it's a positive thing, as long as at the end of the day we can all shake hands, and when we agree as a board on something, we abide by it. We commit to it. I think any well thought out...
So Lisa, if you can please wrap up.
Yes. I think I've just wrapped up. I'll just say one last thing. Again, my profession, I just want to emphasize, requires me to carry out my duty and put my personal opinion aside.
Thank you. Bruce?
Roles and responsibilities. I think a lot has been said that I'm going to agree with. I'm just going to recap it real quick. About setting policy and strategic planning. I think a board is a strategic group that works with the superintendent, senior staff to kind of guide the direction of the district. I think that's part of our role. We're also, we're a single member of a group that has to reach consensus to move forward, and so I think you've heard a lot of talk about consensus is very important. I think the board is very much a community partnership. When you think about who's at the table, there's a lot of people talking at the table in the district. I mean, we're there kind of representing community. That's where we came from, and that's where our connection is. And one of the things that's very important for a board to do, and part of our role, and I've had the experience since I've done a lot of work around the county, and I've done some statewide work. I've seen a lot of boards, and I can tell you real simple what works. And what works is a board that focuses on kids and education. And I know that sounds simple, but you'd be surprised at how many boards are going to spend hours and hours talking about everything about kids and education. It's just mind-boggling, but it happens. So that is key, that we stay focused on what we're here for. We're here for the kids and education. Back to community partnership, the thing that's going to really change, though, is what's happening with the changes in Sacramento. They're going to fundamentally change the role of how the board and the community work together. The community is going to be asked to participate much more. The board has a lot more leeway in deciding how the direction of the district is going to go, how we're going to spend their money, and we're going to actually be asked. The legislation tells us to work with the communities and staff and figure that out. We don't even know how this is going to be done yet. The guidelines aren't even written yet, but we're certainly starting to figure out how this is going to happen. So part of our role going forward is going to be making that connection. How do we listen? How do we work with you guys? And the collaboration has to be more than the 5 of us. The collaboration now has to get much bigger, involving the whole community and staff and everything else. So it's going to be a new world and a challenging world to walk into.
Thank you. Ruth?
Excuse me, I'm coming down. So I don't think I need to repeat everything that everyone else has said. Yes, the board sets policy. We work collaboratively with administration and parents and teachers. And those are the crucial parts of what I see the board needs to do. The other thing that I think I would like to bring to that position would be to be more visible in the classrooms. I want to visit the classrooms. I want to see what's going on in the classrooms. I want to talk to teachers. I want to talk to parents. I want to get their input. And as Bruce has said, it's important, given the LCFF, one of those acronyms, 180 acronyms we got when we went to a community training, and there are new ones coming out every day. But the LCFF is going to require us to be able to hear what the community is saying. And I think that's a crucial part of what I would like to bring to the board. I want to be more visible. I know one of the things that I heard some of the training that the County Board of Education put on for us was a book they talked about called Visible Learning. It's very exciting to read that. It's a meta-analysis. It's a synthesis of 800 meta-analyses of students and effective teaching techniques around the world. And the results of those are very interesting. The core, absolutely, as we know, is the teacher. The other part of it is, there are so many ways in which to get positive effects with children, like reciprocal learning, having high expectations, and I want to be able to see that those kinds of learning experiences happen in the schools.
Thank you. So many of you have mentioned this idea about collaborating with the board and the need. Oh, I'm sorry. You wanted to do the follow-up.
Rebuttal.
Okay, rebut. I'm sorry.
I just wanted to add something. Ruth was talking about getting out there. For the last 4 years, longer than that, that's what I've been doing. I get out there. And I want full transparency. That's what I think I bring to the table. I'm an open book. Anybody in here who's talked to me know that I'm an open book. I talk with the parents. I talk with the administration. I meet with other school boards. I talk with the teachers. I find out what's going on. And I like what people tell me. I feel that I'm so transparent that I'm like ceramic. You know, anytime anybody wants to access me, I'm very accessible, and I put myself out there to even be more accessible, almost to the point of being obnoxious. and I'm sure somebody could account to that. But I feel it's very important to get the feedback from people and to really immerse myself in what's going on in the community and education.
Thank you, Mr. Sarandrap. All right. So, who else? Yes, Lisa.
I have to say that was a huge motivator for me to run for the board too, because when I was last year becoming anxious as a new parent, at that point I had a kindergarten, now I have a kindergartner and a first grader. In the system I wanted information and I had no time to go to public meetings and nobody had time to go to public meetings and everyone felt guilty and no one knew the information. There was rumors of information and tidbits and they knew Common Core but they didn't know what it meant. And I think it's really, really important to bring the information to parents. We're in 2013, we've got webcasting, we can video archive, we have Facebook, there's social media, there's all these ways. I know everyone's on these things or some of these things, and I know people want to get involved, and when you start learning the information, it motivates you to get involved and it makes you make the time. So that was something I felt very passionate about. And if I got on the board, that's something I definitely would bring to the board and that's why one of the reasons I went door to door. And when I'm going door to door, I'll add that many, many people had never heard of the local control funding formula or had just heard the name Common Core. And I really hope to bring that education to the community to make them a full partner as we move forward.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, anyone else?
Yeah, go down this road. So I have a question. Who knows what local control funding formula is in the audience?
Oh.
Great. Do you know what an LCAP is? Okay, it's pretty good. So that's a local control and accountability plan. It has 8 pieces that make it up so far as you may be here. So there's a lot of stuff coming down the road that is going to, I think it's going to change us to where we were before. All politics are kind of local. Schools are local. This is why you don't hear political parties and everything else happening. We all, our kids are like heroin to us. All you have to do is mention your kid's name. How's your kid do today?
Did great.
Yeah, our whole world stops, right? We're mainlining. We love to hear about our kids. You know, for 8 years, I've heard every year we've had board goals, and they have been to expand communication. Every year we've scored that as one of our highest priorities. What I can tell you is that for over 100 years, the California classroom has looked like most classrooms around the world. Rows and columns facing a teacher. And we haven't really changed that, and it's kind of hard to bridge communication, even with all the new mashups that are coming. It's still a challenge, and it'll continue to be one.
Thanks, Mark. Okay, Ruth or Bruce?
Yeah. No, I'm good.
Good.
All right, good. No, you may not. All right, so there's lots of talk about collaboration and this need now to reach out to the community and have this other new relationship that is really going to be needed. And I wonder how you as a board member would think to facilitate that relationship and what it would look like for you. So does that mean we start with Mark, I think? Yes?
In the spirit of the anti-Lobwasser effect, which is going in order and not just being random, taking people out in crazy order. Yeah, I'll go. So this is a big challenge. I work in an industry that is constantly trying to figure out where the perimeter of a network is. Is it controlled with an office and a desk and the front door and the windows and an internet connection coming in to make it, all now have a super gateway? Or does it include the guy who walks out the front door with his device and fires up his Wi-Fi at a Starbucks? How do you control that perimeter, right? The perimeter is no longer, there's a lot of movement in the perimeter, if you will. And it's the same in education. We have all kinds of tools to make our communication with parents and the community easier. But in my neighborhood, about a quarter of my neighbors, I'd be questioned, just because of when they bought the house, which was before 1974, I doubt they have internet connection, right? So you're asking somebody to all of a sudden get involved in a communication style that they're not aware of, right? Or they don't use as aggressively as others might. We also have language barriers in our district, and they're almost school specific around Vallecito. And we've done a lot to include the community there. So the changes that have to come, there's a lot of tools that we have in place, aren't necessarily that easy to wield. Okay, so I've done translations in a classroom, I speak Spanish fluently, and I've had to, the teacher has nodded to the appointment time, and then we realized the person nodded but didn't understand the question. And so we've had to go across the street to the apartment complex that's there and knock on somebody's door and conduct a meeting, right, to talk about their child, because they really do want to talk about their child, right? And then we have issues with, even if you got the right language, maybe that person doesn't have the skill level to read the language you're writing, right? So there's a lot of different issues in a community, and there isn't one just simple answer. And I can tell you, for 8 years on the board, our goal has been to improve communication in the community, and it has been a struggle, even with webcasting, conferencing, Skyping, and all the other ways you could possibly communicate. If you don't have a receptive audience, you got it.
Thank you. Lisa?
I feel like I've largely addressed this, but I'll just make some comments. I hope they don't sound too random. But I know when I came as a parent into the community, and I'd ask questions about the schools, and I was asking other questions about issues in the community, I'd get the response, well, don't you go to the public meetings? And this was besides the fact that I had just moved into the community about a year or two before. So again, I felt there was a bit of an attitude that you had to attend to know, and if you didn't attend and didn't know well, and I don't feel that that's the attitude I've seen in the schools. It was very refreshing to get at Mary Silvera and feel that it was the other way. And so one suggestion I have is we need Will Anderson at every school. Because I think like last week at the Harvest Festival, I think it was every day, maybe twice a day at one point, there were emails about the Harvest Festival from Will Anderson. And it got my attention, and before I knew it, my husband was helping put together a haunted house. So I think the point I'm trying to make, besides just being funny, is that I think that you can't give up on trying to reach out there, and if you're enthusiastic enough and energetic enough, it's infectious and it gets people's attention. And we need people who are going to keep putting themselves out there. We need to keep using the modern technology in all of this, because if the seed gets planted and people do see that there is energy and there's enthusiasm and there's a need, I think people will come on board. We've got all sorts of new families now. I'm not the only one. There's a whole ton of us coming in, and we've got energy, and we're going to get involved. So we just have to keep putting it out there. I'll also say that as I went door to door, I told people about the PowerPoint that's on the board website that goes into the core curriculum and gives absolutely great ideas for hands-on tools and things you can do with your kids, and such as reading fiction with them instead of always instead of always reading fiction. And parents appreciated this, and it was great. So I'm not going to say I'm going to go door to door with every issue. It's been a great campaign diet, but I just think that you just got to keep putting yourself out there.
Thank you. Bruce?
I think you call it the new relationship, or how we need to, the expectation there'll be more connection with the community. I think it was and again, a lot of that is coming by the way that they're asking school districts to run going forward. What I was going to use is two examples of our past that worked really well, and I would look to those as the kind of guide for forward. One was we created a budget committee I think Budget Committee has been very successful. We got people from the community who were very interested. We got staff in the room, we had administrators in the room, we had board members in the room, and we just got together and talked about what the budget was. We kept informed, we informed each other, we got to ask questions. You know, that's the kind of very process-oriented, kind of systematic way to kind of get people involved in form committees, get people who are interested there, and just have really good dialogue, be very open, be very transparent with them. And the other one I want to talk about is more of an organic process, and this is going to be a chance to pass a compliment back to Mark. We did have a very contentious discussion about our busing. And this is what a board does. And I'll just put myself, I was probably in the opposed category. I was looking at the numbers. I am a numbers guy. The numbers did not look good. It was costing us more and more every year to run that system. It was deep into our general fund. And I felt that we're going to reach a point where whether we have to decide if it's worth it or not. As a board, we need to figure that out. I think Mark was on the other end. He pushed very hard and said, we really need to listen to the community. There's a lot of people out there who really can depend on the system. We invited the community to the board meetings. We heard from them. We listened to them. I give a lot of credit to the administration. They provided us a lot of information from the business office, from the superintendent on our numbers. And we really chewed on that for a long time. We never actually got to a vote. And this is a compliment to Mark. At the end of the day, he was right. That if we made some tweaks, we made some changes, we set some guidelines, and we actually established kind of a threshold we wouldn't cross in terms of funding, if we could stick to that, we can keep the bus system. And guess what? Today we have a vibrant bus system that's growing. So that was a detailed process involving the community that worked great, and that's the kind of organic thing we need to do as well as the systematic thing we need to do like the budget committee. And so thank you, Mark, for the bus system that we still have.
Yeah, don't stop in here.
Ruth? So I think one of the things I learned when I met with Tom a week or so ago was how different each of the schools are in the Dixie district. And each one of them has their own culture. And I think it's important that we don't try to find one size fits all, that we need to work with the tapestry of that neighborhood and find ways to reach out within that community. When I was teaching in West Harlem, my school was a model school for City University School of Education. And although the majority of the students in our population lived in a fairly stable home, there was also a lot of in and out, a lot of new immigrants coming in, a lot of them leaving the neighborhood. And I, along with one of the social workers from the City University, started organizing a parent outreach group, not just for those who were living in the neighborhood on a steady basis, but for those who were in and out, trying to find some form of stability and some way of bridging the distance between the school and the home. And we were very successful with that program. Actually, after I left the school, the program continued for many more years. So I would want to do the same thing at Dixie, at Vallecito, at Mary Silvera, at Miller Creek. Each of them are different, and we need to treat them differently. And so that's one of the things I would do. I would also want to bring in support services that I don't know if we're taking advantage of from the other teaching institutions in the area. So that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
To me, collaboration means a lot of things. It means networking, it means learning from others, it means sharing with others. And I think a lot of you may not know, but it kind of starts with Dr. Lowasser. He's a very seasoned superintendent. That we're fortunate enough to have at the district, and he knows many of the superintendents throughout the state. One of the things that we've incorporated is our professional learning communities, which allow the teachers within grade levels and within schools, teachers within grade levels to communicate with one another and learn from one another, so everybody's got the same kind of playing field. They're sharing ideas, they're learning together, they're not learning in silos. We have a very close administrative staff. All the principals, as Ruth was saying, there's different cultures at each school, but all the principals work very closely together in the elementary as well as the middle school. So we have a lot of this networking that's going on. I personally know from the committees that I've been on, that Bruce alluded to, our budget committee, that includes some teachers, it includes some staff, it includes some community members and some board members. And so it's allowed all of us to learn more and understand the budget and try to get that information out to the community. I've been on the coordinating council, and the coordinating council is the group of principals from every school and home and school club members from every school that share ideas and share what's working and collaborate that way. I'm part of the liaison committee, which is a collaboration between the Dixie School District, the San Rafael School District, and the City of San Rafael that discusses issues that affect all of us. So there is a lot of that networking going on now, and we're always trying that outreach to the community more. As Mark was saying, it's always a struggle. So I'm always putting myself out there and being as accessible as I can, and I want to continue that for the next 4 years.
Anybody would like to say anything else?
Yeah, I wouldn't have used the word seasoned, I would have used the word salty.
There we go.
Anything else? All right. So what do you, Lisa, see as the biggest challenge facing the district?
You're starting with me.
I am.
I think the biggest challenge, and at the risk of sounding like a broken record, is just, I believe there's so many new things that are coming in with the laws that are in place with the local control funding formula. It's like I don't want to say perfect storm because that connotes a negative. Then again, lawyers tend to prepare for the worst to achieve the best. So I don't truly feel negative about it. I think there's actually great opportunities before us. But I do think there's some pretty major, again, using the word unprecedented factors all working together. We have a demographic shift that we're all pretty aware of feeling, that's compounded by the fact that, so we have all these new families moving in and for the first time in quite a while, our schools are being impacted, and Mary Sylvia is at full capacity, and to add to that, the influx of students we've had, I think it was last year 5.5% growth in our student body, and this year another 3.7%. These are big increased numbers. Another factor that we're grappling with that's totally new is transitional kindergarten year. And then you add to that this funding formula, you add to that, and it's great because we're going to have the local control, and not to be cynical, a lot of times we get local control when the state doesn't have the monies, and they're like, okay, now you guys get to deal with it. So but I'm a huge advocate for local control, and it is, going back again to the positive, this great opportunity. So we're having to deal with the local control funding formula in combination with the fact that we've got this big demographic shift, so we're going to have to find facilities for growth. Expansion is not about if, it's about a matter of right now. And we're going to have to ultimately deal with all of these things at the same time. And I just think that we're going to have to be extraordinarily proactive in how we plan our resources and understanding what's mandated of us and what's going to keep us the strongest and healthiest in the tradition we've been, and keep us going in the same direction we've been going in.
Thank you. Bruce?
So, this is what's...
The biggest challenge, you think?
I think it's the same thing as the amount of change that's going on right now. And I mean, I want to touch a little bit on this curriculum change. I want to talk about some of the other changes. I just want to put it in context. I mean, curriculum change, the traditional model in schools, curriculum changed every, we do math every 6-7 years, and then you're doing science every 6-7 years, and we had a couple years, to get the textbooks and to train, and so it was a very nice process we went through. We're changing curriculum in all subjects, boom, 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 boom. And it's not a little change. It is a radical, complete, from ground up, all new standards change. I mean, it just when you sit down and think about it, and then think about our teachers, they're going to have to be retrained. They're going to need time and energy. We need tools. So it's huge. I don't want to underestimate it. We're getting a lot of resources, and it's good. It's wonderful stuff. We're now talking about teaching kids about in-depth thinking, about critical thinking, rather than just memorizing. So it's good, but it's huge. Okay, we got that. Same time, let's just change the way we're funded. Let's completely redo everything that we've traditionally done in funding. We're going to do it all different. That's happening at the same time. So we're now trying to figure out how do we fund, how does the board prioritize everything else we're doing. Okay, we've got those two now. Now let's replace all of our assessments. Now recognizing we've got to change everything we do in terms of how we're assessing our kids, how we assess our schools on a statewide, how we assess nationally. All of that is happening simultaneously. And to me, just managing through that process well, actually, I think it's exciting. It gives huge opportunity for us to really start moving forward and with some great foundational stuff. Again, the curriculum is about in-depth critical thinking. The funding gives us local control. It gives us more power. The assessments are much better. So we have all of these great tools that we can now use going forward, but we have to manage that change. So I think, to me, that's the challenge, is how we manage the change with everything that's going on. It's exciting. It's not a negative, but it is a lot of change.
Thanks, Ruth.
So not to sound like a broken record, but
It's about change.
it's about change, right? You know, the budgeting changes, the financial structure, the curriculum, and the changes in the population are and they're all changing at the same time. So it will be challenging. Anybody going through change knows how challenging that can be. We've lost some of the ability to plan appropriately because of the uncertainty around the LCFF. However, the exciting part that Bruce talked about is also available because we'll have more say in how we spend the money, which is exciting. The changing demographics of the area, I think, are also really important. In the demographic analysis that was done, commissioned by the board in last year, 24% of the population at large in the Dixie district is 65 or over. You know that those of us who get to those ages will tend to move out. Younger families with children will move in, so we'll have more children. So I think we need to do, and I think the board has started the process of doing a really thorough facility analysis. As Lisa said, Mary Silvera is at capacity. How are we going to grow? How are we going to handle this influx of young people? Transitional kindergarten is another thing that started this year. So we even have younger children coming into our schools. And I think the balancing act needs to be between managing the change and maintaining the high excellence standards that we have here, and supporting the teachers in implementing the changes in Common Core. Those are crucial.
Thank you. Brad?
What was the question? I think the biggest challenge right now is me getting reelected. The biggest challenge is,
I agree.
The biggest challenges, as Bruce alluded to, that I see are the local control funding formula that's coming down from the budget perspective. The Common Core new teaching methods are very exciting, and the testing is very exciting, and then obviously the increased enrollment that we're facing. And, you know, as I mentioned earlier, it takes a while to kind of even get used to what's going on with the board, and I still need another term to catch up to his understanding of the budget. So coming in with all this change, and maybe not having that experience of the playing field that we've been on for the last 4 years, and how to approach the change, to know where we've been, I think it's important to know where we've been before we know where we're going. And we have to build on what we've had. And I think having an understanding of that, and I'm still learning, but having an understanding of that, and having an understanding of having kids in the district for as long as we have, allows me to see how that change is needed, and how we can affect that change, and how we can help implement that change, and how we can help steer that boat. There's a lot of things going on, and as Bruce said, you know, there's new things that teachers have to learn, new things that administration has to learn, and new things that parents have to learn. And hopefully our experience will allow us to have that foot up to hit the ground running and take the ball to the end zone. Thanks.
Mark?
So I'm the last guy.
Yeah, sure.
So I'm going to say our biggest challenge isn't change. I think that what we do very well. And I don't think there's going to be a whole large movement or shift to what happens in the classroom. I think that we're being asked by the state of California to adopt some new policies, some new proxies, some new ways that we deliver both funding and education, but it's going to be the same stuff teachers have been doing for longer than I've been alive. They're going to work with kids, they're going to talk to kids, they're going to make sure that the kids understanding what's being said. They're going to measure to make sure that they're right. And at the end of the day, they're going to promote kids that that are a little more knowledgeable than they were when they first got them, right? I think these are the basics of education. And you have to have a passion to rally around that. Just like you have to have a passion to rally around parenting. Just like you have to have a passion to rally around being on the school board. Being a superintendent here in this district for over 10 years. Being a teacher for more than 20 years. All this takes commitment. And I think in our district, we're fortunate to have the DNA, right? To have survived a lot of difficult choices without being bleeding edge changers. Okay, we were able to keep, there was a time in the 80s where we were closing a school almost every other year. Okay, there was a time in our district that we had more than 5,000 kids. There was a time in this district that all kids walked to school and you bused for middle school, right? And there was some outlying busing. The way we bused was different. But the things that happened that were different in our district was, as our neighbors sold their campuses, we kept them. As time happened, we kind of said, well, what are we going to do? This might be around for a while. We slowed down and kind of said, well, let's just swallow this and let's chew this one bite at a time and not try to just swallow this elephant of change all at once. And what we ended up with were a number of campuses to provide us an income now. We ended up with a foundation that provides $100,000 a year that we wouldn't have had if we would have sold it 15 years ago, right? So we've done a lot of smart things by not changing, but just kind of sitting and watching. And I hope that our teachers don't change. And I hope our kids don't change.
Thank you, Mark.
Thanks.
Does anybody have an additional yes, Bruce?
Sure, I didn't talk about growth, and so I guess I'll use my minute to talk about it real quick. There's a couple kinds of growth that I think we need to talk about. There's growth with funding and growth without funding. And I think that the growth without funding is what gets people a little panicky. That makes an assumption that since you're basic aid, you say, well, your funding's flat, you don't get more money per kid, but we do get growth in our property tax. And I don't know if you've looked recently, property taxes are growing quite large in Marin. We had a huge uptick. So I'm not saying it's not an issue, I'm just saying it isn't an absolute problem. And it could be that our property taxes want to cover some of our growth. So that's one reason that growth is maybe not as bad as we sometimes think it is. The other one is the facility side. Any growth means you got to deal with it, but that's something that's been done for many years, has been done before. This school right here exists because there was growth a few years ago, and we had to, guess what, we had to open a school, we had to redraw districts. It's been done before, and it's a great school, we're all glad it's here. So it's not something new. But the other thing about basic aid, people say, well, we're basic aid, isn't that wonderful? Well, Dixie hasn't always been basic aid, and I would say Dixie's always been wonderful. So I don't think we need to make that connection. The only reason we're wonderful is because we're basic aid and we got some extra money. And quite honestly, I didn't see my I'm sorry.
Would anyone else
Bruce,
like
take my
their
rebuttal,
minute?
too.
Lisa?
Oh, if you want to stand, I'm okay.
No.
Okay.
No, I followed.
No.
So what I would add is that I agree, I got onto a board, the way I got onto the Municipal Attorneys Association board was because I was largely, hugely pregnant, I think about 7 or 8 months, and I looked at our health care benefits for employees with dependents and was aghast at the fact I was having a child and the child was costing me probably $1,000 more in insurance. And what I learned was that we had a board of older retired attorneys who are looking toward retirement, and their focus was on those issues, and I wasn't really represented on the board. And so I did a lot of my own research, and I came up with some really good ideas I thought at the time, and I presented them in hopes that they would be implemented. And in turn, when I came back from my maternity leave, I was said, why don't you come onto the board and implement them? And so as a result of that, I helped change and reform the healthcare to save the county money as well, and I did it within 2 years. That's what Fresh Perspective can do. You need institutionalized knowledge. No matter what, this board will have that, and it's been wonderful. It's had great leadership, but Fresh Perspective can't be underrated.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll take another minute. I didn't really answer what the greatest challenge was. I think the greatest challenge is our tone. And I'm worried about our tone in education and our tone around change. We have 3 different school districts, 3 different school sites, and they're all very different. We have kids, at every school site here that are born on third base. Their parents read to them they get warm meals 3 times a day, or they get sent, good meals to eat. And we have some kids that don't have those advantages. And they don't even make it to first base, or they don't show up in uniforms to play the game. And they're not read to. And they don't have books at home. And I'm worried that we lose sight of the fact that we deal with a large percentage of these kids already, and we deal with them. And that somehow or another we don't have the capacity to deal with more kids that have these same issues. I don't know what the right number is, but I know that when our tone turns to 0 or none, we've lost sight of why we're here as a board.
Brad or Ruth? No? All right, now it is your turn to ask any questions you would like. I think we have one here. So this question is, I should say that I'm going to give you 1 minute for each of these to respond. So please specify, if you haven't already, what volunteer experiences you have had to date in our district's classrooms. And I think we start with Bruce.
District classroom, I did some math work over here at a class there. I've done reading over in Dixie a few times. Lots of volunteer work outside the classroom, of course, PTA, homeschool club. In the classroom, I think I did some math stuff with the teacher here, and I did reading to kindergarten children.
Okay. Ruth?
Well, I haven't done any volunteering in the Dixie School District. I've just recently semi-retired, so before then, what I did do, though, was I worked with seniors who were disabled while I was doing my internship, volunteered with them and worked with them. These were Holocaust survivors who were homebound, and I would visit them once a week as part of my internship. As I said, when I was teaching as a volunteer, I volunteered at the after-school programs, and I volunteered to get this community outreach program going. When my children were in school, I was on the PTA, I was on the auction committee. I took lots of different opportunities there to be involved in their classrooms.
Brad?
Where do I start? I was, aside from school, I was a volunteer board member of the Marinwood Community Food Bank for 13 years. So our mission was to feed people who needed food. And so it really gave me a real good sense of community and need. When I started school, volunteering in the classroom every year for reading, for driving on field trips, for going to Gold Country, for going to Lawrence Hall of Science, for the overnight trips. I love reading in class at every level. For my own kids, and when we have Read Across America, done that. I've gone to home and school and site council meetings at every campus. And I think one of the best things that we get is when we see the kids and we I guess you could say the fruits of our labor. It all ends right there and begins.
Mark?
It's a ridiculous question. I mean, at the end of the day, where do you start and where do you stop? You can't do it in 2 minutes. I mean, it really is. I mean, the teachers' appreciation luncheons, walkathons, Read Across America. Are this question just about classroom time?
Just reading what was written here, Mark.
Is that right?
Yes, it says that you have had to date in our district's classrooms.
So I've cleaned up dirty tables, I've helped with sorting, I've swept after the auditoriums, been filled, I've been at music events, I've sat in music classes and been amazed. I've sat in every classroom in Val, it seems like at one point or another. I've gone to the Gold Country and smelled your children after 3 days. I've driven them after 3 days. I've gone on a ton of field trips. I've danced hoedowns, okay, and worked on projects and gotten sticky fingers from the glue. So, I mean, I've done a lot around kids. I got 3 kids, and there's a lot to do.
So I'm right in the beginning of my kids' journeys in the schools, and I haven't been able to volunteer right in the classrooms here. I will say that what I have done is I've worked with high school students in San Francisco, educating them because of my job places in San Francisco. So I'm sent out to educate them on relevant legal issues and help them with practical life skills. I've also worked, I have a sibling that's mentally disabled as well, or she passed away, but I did, and I have another visually challenged sibling, and so I put a lot of work into Broadcast for the Blind and working with blind students in law school and actually in my graduate program. And for a long time I worked as a court-appointed special advocate for foster kids. It's a passion for me, the foster care system. So I haven't, but I plan to see, hope you will see me around in upcoming times. Especially if I get on the board, I want to know what's happening in the classrooms.
No. I got a bunch of questions here, so I think we want to go for these. So sorry, moderator's prerogative. So Ruth, why don't we start with you? This question is, cyberbullying is a problem at the middle school level. How will you ensure that the district policy on in-person and cyberbullying is followed and taken seriously? And what will you do if a teacher or school administrator handles incidents of bullying inappropriately or with apathy?
I know that the Dixie district has implemented an anti-bullying campaign. I think Andy Hyman was one of the people who helped begin that process of that. If I hear of a bullying incident, I will make sure to find out what's going on there. I can tell you that cyberbullying is one of the biggest challenges we might face as parents or grandparents or guardians of children. There have been devastating consequences because of it. And specifically, I think the board would work at setting policies. If a teacher didn't handle it appropriately, then I would want to deal with the administration to make sure that that was addressed appropriately in the chain of command. Thank you.
Thanks. Brad?
As Ruth said, we have a really strong anti-bullying campaign, and it's really taken, it's really grown in the last 4 years. I mean, it's huge. It's getting a lot of attention, not only here, but nationally. Cyberbullying, I think, starts even before middle school. The question was just middle school, but we really got to prepare our kids before that. People are getting cell phones earlier. We have implemented this year in our middle school a section of that Chris Case is heading up is digital citizenship. And so I know Candu's been a big part of furnishing computers to allow him to teach the digital citizenship, and it's going to be a requirement for 6th graders coming into middle school. Now we have a set of checks and balances, and I'm very I have a lot of trust in the chain of command going from principal and then ultimately the superintendent to deal with these types of issues. And I think it's been proven in the past that many of these types of issues that have happened have been dealt with swiftly and cleanly. Thanks.
Mark?
It's kind of neat to call it cyberbullying, but I think bullying's been around for a long time, and before all of our time. So I think it's something that will continue. I want our teachers and our staff to be trained in how to deal with it, to recognize it when they see it. Having been in Cub Scouts as an assistant Cub master, and most recently, probably more relevant, having coached youth football. I'm just saying that because I'm around a couple dozen boys wearing pads, hitting each other. Defining bullying becomes kind of an interesting question, right? So you kind of have to get a feel for when you know it and you see it, and I'm sure our teachers get that. The part that's frightening about cyberbullying is that we're not seeing it, right? And not being able to see it is part of the fear, right? And hopefully what we're doing is we're teaching our kids to use language that's appropriate for dealing with conflict or feelings that are different or fear. right? So I would hope that we continue to work with our kids to learn the right language to deal with their differences. Thanks.
So I actually, I was a special prosecutor in stalking, and that's when I first started to come across stalking as in stalking people, creepy stuff. And I was prosecuting that unit when internet stalking became a really big problem. So that was a huge assignment for me, and I started getting training, and cyberbullying became this subtopic at that time. It was right when it was being noticed as an issue. And then I went to a training in 2009 in Arlington, Virginia by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Kids because I was handling child abduction, and we had a huge segment on it. And I think it has to, I can't emphasize it's different from bullying because it's so prolific and lasting and pervasive when it happens. And it can be devastating to the target of it. So I don't take it lightly. I think that the program in place I've looked at myself, and I think it's really good. I think if you find that a teacher is not reacting appropriately, then you do need to make sure that the training that's in place is adequate and that new teachers coming in are getting it. You also have to hear all sides and you have to recheck your protocol. But I think as a board, we together have to make decisions if something needs to be revised.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Bruce?
Okay, things I think that are key around this is one, start early, and I mean real early. I think kids need to understand that this world that they're growing into, I think is moving down younger and younger, so I don't think we can almost start too early in talking about technology and bullying. And I think we talked a little bit about, is bullying's always been around, but technology has changed the game, I think, materially. And that's when we got to deal with it. It's really blurred the lines between the school and the home. It used to be, well, you're on school grounds, here's the rules, you're on school grounds. That's totally been blurred with technology, and we got to deal with that. We got to understand it. We got to think of constant renewal. The tools are changing. What kids use, every other year there's something different. So you always are learning new stuff. The other key is back to this thing around those blurred lines, involve the community. We've got to get the families involved in this discussion. It isn't just us and the kids. We've got to get the whole family involved in it because it extends beyond us. They might be using our tools to do bullying. What the play art is now virtual, so it's done everywhere. There was the question, I'll just throw it here, what do we do if a principal is not handling it? But to me, it's the same question. What do you do if a principal's not doing their job? You talk to the superintendent about dealing with that. We don't accept that. The board has to make sure that doesn't happen, but it's really the district administration's responsibility to handle.
Great, thank you. All right, so Brad, a new question for you. How do you feel about the level of compensation for teachers in the distinguished Dixie School District?
I feel the level of compensation for the board members is very low. Very low. I think, like anybody, I want to give teachers more money. Teachers do a great job. I think they have the hardest job in the world. My sister's a teacher, and I know many, if not most of the teachers in our district. I feel our district is a nice place to work. It's a nice place to have our kids. It's a nice place that attracts a lot of good quality teachers, and a lot of our teachers stay here because of that. There are I don't want to say checks and balances, but there are programs in place where there's raises after a certain amount of time that are automatically built into compensation. If we had more money, if we were floating around with a lot of money, I think the first place that it should go is the teachers. Obviously we're not in that position. We haven't been for quite some time, but I always feel teachers are the base. That's just me.
Mark?
So we're a small district. Teachers and staff account for over 80% of our budget. It's something that's serious because you don't have a lot of excess.
Mark, can you speak up or use that? I'm getting motion that they can't hear
Yeah, no problem. I was just thinking and talking at the same time. It's something I have trouble doing. Can you hear me now? So here's the issue. We have limited funds each year. We don't know how much those funds are going to be. We do our best to project for 5 years whether or not we can support the funding we have in place. We have a goal about 7 years ago as a board, 8 years ago it was being formulated to have a formula about how to compensate our teachers. The board made a commitment to raise salaries in the county to be in the top 25% of all salaries across school districts in the county. We have nailed that number pretty consistently or gotten closer, been in the right direction. So as a district, we continue to recognize our teachers as some of the highest paid teachers in the county, and that's a goal of the board, and I've never heard anything different.
Lisa?
As I stated earlier, I think our number one resource are the teachers. And I've always felt that way. When I worked in Latvia, I made $40 a month, and I was a really happy teacher, but I was super poor. And that was actually a decent salary at the time. But I would say that my understanding is that 85% of our budget, more or less, goes to our staffing, and I think that's how it should be. And I think it demonstrates that we prioritize our staff and we'll pay them what we can and have. I think it is important that, as was stated, we've done our research and we make sure our teachers command a competitive salary, so we'll retain the good committed ones. And I think the teachers that we have reflect that. So I think that what we're doing is the right thing, and I think that the people on the board and the board as a body recognizes the importance of teachers, and the teachers will always be compensated well when we have the money.
Thank you. Bruce?
I think we need to be competitive. I think that's the key. Early when I was saying the money's not important, because essentially the way you deliver good education is having high quality teachers. I think we do a great job of finding and retaining the best, and I think that's part of the Dixie tradition. But I think you need to be competitive. Just to disagree with Mark a bit, some of our teachers are very highly paid. Not all of our teachers are. If you look on our schedule, some of our teachers are more middle of the range in terms of the county, and some are below that. I'd like to see that moved up. And it's just a struggle. So I think if we're not competitive, we're not going to be able to retain the best, and so we have to stay competitive. We've got to figure that out. And I think the way you do that is one of the things at the end of the day that people want to be paid what they believe is fair. I think there is no absolute right number. It's just I want to be paid fairly. The way you can help them establish fairness is get them the clear understanding of how much money the district does and where the money's going and how we prioritize. So I think if teachers are part of our budgeting process and understand it, I think that's the way they'll feel good about what they're paid. It's the best we can do.
And Ruth?
Well, I'm encouraged by the fact that 80% of the budget that goes to those who deliver to our children the education that we want them to have. I think that reflects on the quality of education we have. I don't think we could pay teachers enough for what they do. When I was a teacher, people used to say, oh, you've got it so easy, you get in at 9, you leave at 3, you have summers off, you have Christmas, Easter. That's not what teachers do. Teachers work from morning till night, whether it's with children or without children, and they deserve every penny that they get, and probably twice as much. For the amount of time and the energy and the passion that they bring into their classrooms, they deserve that and more.
Thank you. All right, I apologize to those who submitted questions. We're not going to be able to get to them because I want to give each of our candidates 1 minute to make a closing statement. And I believe that means we start with Mark.
I'll take 3 questions from the audience and give 20 seconds for each one. So if you raise your hand, I'll take the question. If you have an unanswered question, go ahead. You didn't have a chance to ask it. I appreciate it.
There it is, over here.
Go ahead.
Given the district's current capacity issues and funding challenges, what impacts do each of you foresee for the district regarding excessive tax-exempt housing in our district?
Excessive what?
Excessive tax-exempt housing?
So I think I'm the only one who volunteered to answer the question. I'll say that the answer is not easy because I've talked to a number of people on both sides of the fence, and the problem I have over and over again is when I ask what's an okay number, and nobody gives me an okay number. In other words, so if somebody says the number is 150, everybody freaks out. If I turn around and say, that's a high number, man, what is an okay number? I never hear anything, I hear, I don't know. Okay, so I'm a little disturbed just in general that we don't know what a number is okay to be. In other words, if we have a housing unit, there's 80 units going in, and we hear there's going to be 40 more kids coming to our school, is that number okay? Is it okay for you?
Well, I don't look at it in terms of
All
number.
right, we're not going to have a discussion
That's
here,
what I asked, because I
so.
asked that question, I never
Julie,
get a
what's
number.
our-
And that's my problem, is I never get the number. So if I could hear what an okay number is, I could rally around understanding how we budget for those number of kids. But I've never heard an okay number, and that's my fundamentally, I think that's where the tone gets off track, is because we can't get to a number that we all agree on is kind of okay.
All right, thanks, Mark.
You bet.
All right, Lisa, you.
Okay, and I would just, I don't want to get delved too much into the topic, but I would just say, I do think that we're at a time when there's a lot of issues facing our community, and Justin Kai's brought up housing. It's on everyone's mind on one level or another. Everyone has positions around it. The school board is a nonpartisan, it's a non-political position, and we have to maintain that integrity. That's how we keep trust and confidence in the community. On the other hand, we have a duty to be not only transparent, but proactive and fully and thoroughly informing the community on critical issues so that they can be true community partners with us in protecting and preserving our resources. So I do think that you have this balance you have to make in your duties and priorities, both of which are very important as a board member. And I think that it's not about the number of students and what people think, because to me that's involving yourself in the political question. It's about doing your duty and getting the information as best you can to the community so everyone's aware of our finite resources and we can plan proactively.
Thank you. Bruce?
Since in my opening I cut myself short because I didn't manage my time well, I'm just going to use my last paragraph because I think it works now. This is a time of very exciting change. There's more in-depth curriculum through the Common Core. There's more local control in our funding formula and more participation in how we define our priorities. We're experiencing significant and need to ensure the quality of education is not impacted. I would like to continue to be involved in this work through these changes, and I'm asking for your vote. I'm going to use a quote that I got from Mary Jane Burke that I like a lot. It's that there's a wonderful privilege in public education. We get to educate all the kids, not the self-selected ones, everyone who shows up. And that's a wonderful thing, which I cherish very much. So again, I'm looking to stand on the board, and I ask for your vote. And if you've got friends, talk to me about them, and I ask for their vote too. Thank you.
Ruth?
Well, I'd like to thank you for hosting tonight and for you for emceeing. When we began, I said that I believe that healthy schools are at the heart of our community. I understand the changes and challenges that are in front of us, and I think I bring a unique combination of experiences to positively influence the direction of our schools as a trustee on the board. I believe, as others have said, that we need to be collaborative and creative and very active in the schools and on the board, given all the changes for the coming years. This will take an investment of time, which I have available since I'm semi-retired. I am ready, willing, able, and eager to put my wisdom, maturity, experience, and time into the schools. Thank you.
Brad?
As I said at the outset, I'm involved in our school district. I'm invested in our community. I will be for the FRC future. I love what I do. I think I'm just getting started, and I really ask for your support and vote, and I'm very accessible. So if you have any questions, you want to talk about anything, I'm an open book. And I invite your questions, I invite your concerns, I invite your praise. And as I mentioned at the outset also, I read a quote in the IJ a while back that said, just because there's election doesn't mean that something's broken.
So I'd like to first thank Julie Kritzberger, who has had the unenviable job of keeping us on time. So thank you so much. And to our hosts here who put out some lovely food, I'm sure they'd appreciate if you had something at the end. And most especially to our candidates for stepping forward and being willing to give of their time, energy, and experience to what is really a fabulous thing. And I think that regardless of where this turns out, I'm pretty sure our district's in really good hands. So. All right.